And this is a program that about a topic we definitely address a lot, and that is dealing with species of birds that are considered less desirable. Now, I must say right up front, I know that many of you that there's no such thing as a less desirable species of bird, and I'll almost 100% agree with that. There, I have a couple that can rub me wrong, but what the idea here is that there are some, and I'm going to try to give you reasons why people think they're less desirable, and then solutions on how to deal with them. Now, the house finch let's say it this way. I want to, I always say the definition of a weed is a plant that's growing where you don't want it. And I think that's kind of the same thing with less desirable birds, and that is birds that are where you don't want them, and there's some reasons for that, and there's circumstances that make certain species less desirable. The house finch has a beautiful song, and they are, they're not terrible birds by any stretch of the imagination, but when they were introduced into the eastern part of the United States and worked their way west, where they never were before. I mean, they were pretty new here in the 80s in Missouri, and now they're pretty much everywhere. The reason they were less desirable or deemed less desirable out east was because they chased away goldfinches. So they were displacing goldfinches from bird feeders, and that for people was upsetting because they loved their little goldfinches, and these guys were more aggressive and they would chase them away. But there's a way to deal with that, and the way they dealt with that, and I'm going to reach over here and get this feeder, is they created the upside down finch feeder. And that is, the holes are below the perches. They learned that house finches don't hang upside down to feed, where goldfinches will hang upside down all day long. It's not a problem for them. So they quite often found that these feeders kind of exploded in sales back in the 60s and 70s. But now, one of the things that we've learned in a method, you don't have to have this. Some people buy these now just because they're fun and they like watching the birds hang upside down to feed on. But one of the things that we've learned, of course, is that house finches love safflower seed. And you're going to hear this theme throughout this program today. The seed choice is going to be a major component of discouraging or encouraging certain species that may be considered less desirable, or how to get rid of ones that are less desirable. Safflower seed, house finches love. And as long as I have safflower seed out, they hardly ever go to the Niger or to the finch food. So safflower seed is a problem-solving seed, as we always used to call it. So when they're on your jelly, and not a lot you can do about that. And if you complain about them eating too much jelly, you can always just pull your jelly, obviously. But they will eat some jelly with your orioles and things, but they're not going to really run off orioles. They're not that, they're smaller than orioles, so orioles tend to be able to have the upper hand there, but they will eat your jelly. So they're not that undesirable there, but if they're running off goldfinches, that can be a problem. Got a couple of ways to deal with the upside down feeder, but mainly safflower. All right, so another bird that a lot of people feel is less desirable are blue jays. People, you either love blue jays or you hate blue jays. It seems to be the situation. And people that, like on my side of the fence, I love blue jays because they are the burglar alarms, and they are great at deterring hawks in your backyard. So if you prefer blue jays over, say, a Cooper's hawk eating your birds, then attract the blue jays, because the blue jays will help chase away Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks that may be buzzing your yard. Blue jays are almost always in family groups. There's always 5, 6, 7 of them together, and they're great at announcing the presence of a predator and alarm the other birds. So what I do is I try to attract blue jays to my yard, and I use in-shell peanuts. If you don't want blue jays at your feeders, don't feed any mixture that has nuts in it, because they love nuts. They're acorn-dependent birds, and so they love nut mixture. So if a seed mix that you're feeding has a lot of nuts in it, you're likely to attract some blue jays. All right, another one that some people consider less desirable, but some other people's love, is the red-winged blackbird. these are related to the Baltimore Oriole, and the males are quite pretty. But when most people have problems with red-winged blackbirds is in the migration, and especially spring and also in fall when they're moving in these huge flocks and they descend on your backyard. I've seen 50 to 75 of these birds in my yard when I lived out east of Liberty in a real open yard, and they would come in. But that only lasted for a couple of days. So we get a lot of complaints about red-winged blackbirds at just a very short and limited period of time, but my assurance is it doesn't last long. Unless you live near a grain silo, maybe, or where they harvest seeds. When we talk about choosing seeds, how you avoid most of these birds is don't feed cheap, I want to call them grocery store blends. Grocery store blends that contain a lot of cracked corn and millet and milo and oats and wheat and all those things that are fillers. Remember, these are more grain eaters, and so grains are going to attract the blackbird group to your feeders. Whereas if you feed the seeds, when that is sunflower, safflower, peanuts, you tend to keep the more desirable birds. So if you do have a problem with red-winged blackbirds, don't feed the grocery store blends, and know that usually one or two of these is pretty, but in spring migration or fall migration, you may have a bunch of them for a short period of time. All right, so probably to me, the hardest, less desirable species to deal with is the house sparrow. And house sparrows can be super numerous. Of course, this is the male. And let's get the picture of the female up there. Nope, there it is right there. The female house sparrow. And there will be a lot of these as your feeders, depending upon the habitat around you. Again, these are our grain eaters, and they love millet. I have my ground throw mixture I make, and the whole idea behind the ground throw mix was they can't beat them, so I join them theory, and that is, instead of feeding a really cheap blend that's got a lot of waste seed in it, millet is actually a good seed. It's a grain, and it attracts sparrows. So instead of, I can't keep them out of my feeders, so I use seed to both lure them away and make it where they want. House sparrows love to feed on the ground, and they love millet. So I put in my good feeders, obviously I have my boardwalk blend and nut and berry and my Finch mix, black tie stuff. But I take and throw the ground throw right onto the ground, and that helps keep those house sparrows off of my feeders. Now, as soon as that runs out, they're going to go attack on there. So I use that can't beat them, so I'm joining mix, because house sparrows are smaller than a lot of birds that you're trying to dissuade, and they're smaller than some of your favorite birds. So you can't use size against them, so you have to use their preference. So the two that are the most famous to have problems for are the European starling and the common grackle. Now, first off, let's differentiate the two. The common grackle is a larger bird with a much longer tail. And it is primarily black, but it has that iridescent purple head and that dark, heavier bill. While that starling is a short, chunky bird with a very, very short tail, and the bill is bright yellow and pointed in the spring, and in the winter months it is black and it's always still pointed. This one's half and half because it's in molting period when this picture was taken. So these birds are by most people, the truly most undesirable species at their feeders. So the one good thing is you can use size against them. We're going to use safflower seed, which they both hate, and you can, if you've got an open tray feeder in the season when they're here. Now the grackle only come in about April, late February, late March, April, and then they tend to leave in August. So you've got a fairly short season for them. And a lot of people switch their seed. They may feed nut and berry or boardwalk blend all winter, but during the grackle season they'll switch to safflower seed, and they're open feeders called safflower. They do not like it. The picture here that Carrie took that's on the poster today's post. You see this tray is full of safflower seed, and these grackle hate that. One of the things that they'll do is when they first come in, if that feeder's got boardwalk blend in it, and you switch it to safflower, then they're going to sift through that thing and they're going to toss that safflower all over the place looking for that one sunflower seed that they want out of there. But you have to go cold turkey on them. And I recommend at first only put a little bit in the tray feeder because they'll throw a lot of it out on the ground until and a couple of times doing that, and they realize there's no sunflower there and they leave. So starlings are the same way. They just don't like safflower seed. House sparrows don't like safflower seed very much. So safflower seed here is a good theme for controlling a lot of these pest species. Now, the other thing that works really well against both of these species is their size, because they're bigger than most of the birds you want to attract. So while you've got safflower in your open trays, a good cage feeder works wonderfully if you want to feed a sunflower based mix in it, because those guys can't get their fat bodies through here. Now, anything downy, woodpecker and smaller can fit through these cages. So your small birds are going in here. Your open tray will take care of your cardinals, because you don't want to ever lose your cardinals, but they love safflower. So this makes a great safflower feeder that's dissuading your starlings and grackle. And then for your goldfinches, Niger seed. The Niger seed sitting over there. The Niger for your goldfinches, the blackbirds don't like that. So you tend to use a combination of Niger for your finches, safflower in your open trays, and then your really good blends that have a lot of nuts and sunflower in it will go in a cage feeder. You can deal with problem species. Remember, they can be worked around. And the good news, like I said, the grackle tend to leave in August, move out to the farm fields, and they spend the winter in the Gulf. Starlings tend to move out into farm fields, and for a lot of people at my house, the starlings don't come back in until January when weather conditions get really stressful. So there are workarounds. Remember, seed preference, quality seed will do a lot of the work for you when it comes to these problematic species. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. We got one?
Yep, Patty Avis asks, are there any bird seed that raccoons don't like?
Is there any bird seeds that raccoons don't like? The best luck we've had there is with the heated seed. You know, we have the flaming squirrel. This liquid comes in the bottles, and we also have sizzling heat from Wild Delight that is pre-treated. And so, you know, mammals' taste system is completely different from birds, so you can use hot stuff to dissuade the raccoons. Nothing's 100%, and when you're talking about wild animals, because wild animals, you know, will always prove you wrong. Every once in a while, there may be a raccoon or a squirrel that will eat this stuff. For the most part, it's been very effective. We sell a lot of it. And then if you want your own birdseed mixture and you want to heat it up, Coles makes this flaming squirrel that you mix in like shake and bake, and put that out. So you can use heat against those raccoons. By far the most effective anti-raccoon method is a pole system with a good raccoon baffle they can't climb. So there's that. That if you have the luxury of being able to put a pole out in your yard, you can keep raccoons off of it. So, but good question. Not just birds that are less desirable. We have some mammals too. So I do thank you for joining in. Please give us a like, give us a share if you will. That really helps us out. And please send in more ideas for programs, because we always want to talk about what you're wanting us to talk about. So thanks again. Come by till next week. Come by, let's talk birds.